name's Pastor Kurt. I am one of the pastors around here. You are the smartest crew in all of Bayside Auburn. If you're new here, you got it right the first time. Way to go. Every other service, we have had zero room, and I mean zero room. We just had 300 people come to the 6:30 a.m. service. I was there preaching a different message. That's why I was a little late getting on stage, because I couldn't find the message for this service. I was preaching a different message, and I wasn't even awake during that service while preaching. So you figured it out. This is the best service. Let's just jump right into the message. I want to talk a little bit about how outlandish it is to claim that someone, anyone, came back from the dead. And I want to start it by just explaining a fact you should know about me. If you've been coming here for a little while, you probably already figured this out. If you haven't, I'll let you know right at the beginning. I should not be a pastor. I really shouldn't. I say things every weekend that would probably get me fired at any other church. And at least I'm honest about it. I shouldn't, no one from my elementary school, high school, middle school, our family would have ever guessed that I would become a pastor. I didn't grow up in a very religious home. We went to church on Easter, Christmas, and maybe a couple other times during the year when my mom felt guilty. We were not religious. I didn't know anything about the Bible. I didn't know there's an Old Testament, New Testament. I didn't know what Gospels were. I was reading the Old Testament once right after I started following Christ, and I ran upon this book, and they said, "What book are you reading, Kurt?" And I said, "It's the book of Job." If you know the Old Testament, it's actually the book of Job, and they laughed at me just like you just laughed. And I said, "It's J-O-B, it's the book of Job." And they said, "No, you don't say it that way." I knew nothing. I was the least likely candidate, and part of it was I wasn't a great student. I always had, I always got that teacher evaluation. Kurt's one of the smartest kids in class. If he'd just apply himself. I always got that thing. But, I had I didn't have ADD. I had something a little different. I had ADDDDDDD. That's what I had. And you know what they call a person with just regular ADD? A man. So I had, only the women laughed at that. So, you just never said this guy was going to be a pastor. Part of it was I didn't stand out. I was kind of an invisible kid for a while. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to do a little exercise. Everyone has to participate, okay? You ready for this? If you are the oldest child in your family, if you're the oldest sibling growing up, raise your hand right now. Where's my oldest at? Okay, gotcha. Okay. Every one of you oldest, look at me. I have a message directly from Jesus Christ for you. God has given me a word for you. Look at me, oldest, right now. Here's the message. You're not the boss of me. I don't care what mom said when she left. You are not the boss of me. All right, where's my youngest? You were the youngest child in the family? Oh, a lot of them. A lot of them. We're going that 8:15 service, man. We're good. Okay, youngest, I love you. I was 5 of 7. I have a message from the Lord Jesus Christ directly to you this morning. And out of love, I want you to receive it, okay? Here's the message. You got away with too much. You were spoiled rotten. You're still spoiled. You were barely raised. By the time you came around, mom and dad were so tired of raising kids, you're a feral human. Dad spent your childhood asleep on the couch with a remote control on his chest. All right, where's my middles? Every middle, anywhere in the middle. I was 5 of 7. All right, middles. Look at me in the eye, middles. I said everything I said before to make this point. Here's the message directly from God for us middles. God knows your name. No one else does. There's like 2 baby pictures of you. The youngest has like 3 volumes. The oldest has 3 volumes, and she did her own baby book. There's none of you. See, growing up, my mom had this clever idea that whatever child was a girl was going to be named after my biological father. His name was Leslie. And so all the girls in my family had L names, and then all the boys had C names after my mom, Carol. So my oldest sister is Leslie, and then there's Carrie, Chris, Craig, Kurt, Lisa, and my stepsister, Kelly. Now, this is a horrible idea. If you've not had children yet, please do not do this idea, because what happens is I was never called my name growing up. My mom never got my name not right once. So when she would call my name, it would sound like this. Carrie, Chris, Craig, Kurt. She said, Carrie, Chris, Craig, Kurt. That meant just Kurt. No, Carrie, Chris, or Craig never came. It was just me, because what happens, she had 6 kids in 8 years, and here's what happens. Children give mothers brain damage. So to get my name, she had to go through the cycle of every child she gave birth to and tell me to get my name correctly. I just was kind of an invisible kid. They thought I wouldn't do much, and I thought I wouldn't do much. I met with my school counselor my senior year, and he said, Kurt, college isn't for everyone. For instance, it's not for you. They're hiring at the mill. Nothing wrong with the mill. But yet here I am, I'm a pastor. How did that happen? Well, it has everything to do with the passage we're about to study just for a few minutes this morning. It has everything to do with what theologians call the Gospels, which is the 4 first books of the New Testament. It's the 4 stories, the eyewitness stories of the life of Jesus. Matthew writes one that's pretty much to Jewish people, and then Mark, that's the one we're going to look at. He writes, and that's pretty much for everyone. It's the simplest one. I always call it the In-N-Out burger of Gospels, because it's simple, but man, is it good. And then you have Luke, that's the longest one. That's like the King's Table buffet. Everything's in there. And then you have John, and John is more like I call it the soap opera one. It's more relational. It has all the relational aspects in it. All 4 of the Gospels tell this story about the death and resurrection of Jesus. Other places in the Gospel, they tell some stories about Jesus, and then the next book doesn't tell that story. It tells a different story. They all have a perspective and a different audience and a different priorities, but when it comes to the last week of Jesus' life, they all spend more time on that last week than any other part of Jesus' life. And they all tell this story. Let's go ahead and read it right from Mark. This is the simplest version. It's Mark chapter 16, if you turn your Bibles, hope you are. I'm going to start in the 2nd verse, and it just says this in a very direct way. It says, very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, who's the they? It's one gal named Mary, another gal named Mary, and their friend Salome. Mary, and Salome were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? So what's happening here is the apostles, the main followers of Jesus, have seen Jesus get tortured and then crucified. Crucifixion is a very humiliating way of dying, a very cruel and painful way of dying. And it was meant to strike fear into people, and it worked. Even though Jesus had told his apostles multiple times he's going to raise from dead, they didn't believe him. And so what they were doing, they were hiding. All the men were hiding. And these 3 women, in great courage, amazing courage, actually didn't hide. They were making their way to the tomb. Why? Because Jesus died right before the beginning of the Sabbath. The Sabbath starts on sundown Friday night. So when the sun goes down, that's the beginning of Sabbath, and it lasts till sundown Saturday night, just that 24-hour period. Well, Jesus died very close to the sun going down, so they couldn't finish the burial rituals. They couldn't put all of the wrapping and the anointing that they put on the body. So these women, with great grief in their heart and great courage in their lives, risk their life. There's no due process. There's no Miranda rights. If the people that crucified Jesus wanted to crucify all the followers of Jesus to put down his movement in a second, they could have. So the apostles are hiding, expecting to be arrested at any moment. The women are so eager, they make their way first thing in the morning, and then they realize we got a problem. This tomb is sealed by a very large stone. Now, the reason the stone is there is to keep away grave robbers. And so the stone is very, very large. And there's 2 different methods generally in the first century where you would use a stone in front of a grave. And one is you could move it by the use of a wedge-like tool. But even that wedge-like tool, you needed 10, 15 strong men to use that tool. The other way is they would dig a groove and they would roll the stone in that groove. But these stones were so large, even with the groove, again, you would need 10 or 15 people. And the idea was 2 grave robbers in the middle of the night are not going to be able to move this stone, and that was their security method. So the women, so focused on Jesus, have this revelation. Oh no, we're going to get there. He's going to be in the cave with an unmovable stone. And then it goes on and says, but when they looked up, they saw the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in white robes sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be afraid. Don't be alarmed, he said. You are looking for Jesus of the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell the disciples and Peter. This is so telling. The angel's saying this. Those people that are afraid of being crucified, that did not hear Jesus say that he would conquer death, even though he told them multiple times. Those guys that believe Jesus is dead forever, even though Jesus told them he wouldn't be, go tell them, and especially Peter, who's the most afraid. Because Peter has had the worst interaction with Jesus you can have, and now Jesus is dead, and Peter believes it is unredeemable, that he'll never get another chance to say to Jesus, I'm sorry, I don't know why I was so afraid. I let you down. I proclaimed moments before that I would go to death with you, and then the moment came and a little girl scared me into denying you 3 times. The angel says, please, job 1, go tell the disciples that are hiding and Peter who failed. Tell them he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and they fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone along the way because they were afraid. I want to ask 3 simple questions about this. And I want to kind of take us out of our regular Easter mode and get us to think about the actual Bible accounting of this. Because we get in this Easter mode, and here's how the Easter mode goes. We dress our little boys up and we dress our little girls up, and it's cute little Easter dress. And, you know, a little girl in a cute little Easter dress, like, look at that. That is adorable. And then, you know what I love? I love the boys when they wear the bow tie. A little boy comes to church in a bow tie, and it's all pastel colors, and you sit in a row with your family, and grandma sit together, and you all look like you just went to the Nordstrom's rack and got great deals, and praise God for Nordstrom Rack, right? And so, yeah, I love all of that. There's nothing wrong with that, but that is not Easter. That's our fun cultural celebration of spring break. Easter was not pastel colors. It was mud and blood, and it was scary. Think about this. Just get yourself in this mind before we ask these questions. If you went to a funeral on Monday here in Auburn or Grass Valley, Cool, wherever you live, and you went to a funeral and it was an open casket funeral, and you went by the dead person, paid your last respects to that person, and then on Monday morning, Monday afternoon, you're walking down the street and the guy in the casket starts walking directly towards you on the sidewalk. What would you do? I'll tell you what you would do. You would do something where if you had adult diapers on, it would be good. Too honest? You're not going to make it in this church if that's too honest, because I say stuff. Okay, there's the atheist gal that I follow. She's a very smart professor in England. Her name is Professor Alice Roberts, scientist, humanist, which means she believes in the potential of humanity over religion. And she's an atheist, devout atheist. And she likes to post little things against Christians all the time. She wrote this on Easter on X, or otherwise Twitter, or whatever you want to call it. Just a little reminder today, dead people don't come back to life. All these Christians got upset with her. But I'm like, you know what? From her point of view, I totally see what she's saying. Because dead people in our experience don't come back to life. If we saw any dead person come back to life, when the apostles said, I don't believe that what Jesus said, he's coming back to life, you and I would have been the same. Thomas, what's Thomas's nickname? You guys remember Thomas? Doubting Thomas. What a ripoff. It's a horrible nickname. That's a horrible nickname. They come running back. Yeah, Jesus is not dead. He's not dead. There's angels, tombs rolled away, Roman guards split. He's not dead. Thomas goes, wait, I'll believe it when I could touch his wounds and I see him in person. I think that's a very reasonable response. I want to change Thomas's nickname from Doubting Thomas to Thomas who asked a very reasonable question at the end. It's a longer nickname, but it's more accurate. The women, they understood that this was unusual and outrageous. That's why they were trembling. The disciples understood it was unusual and outrageous. That's why they didn't believe Jesus and they were hiding. Thomas knew it was unusual and outrageous. That's why he said, I won't believe it till I see the proof. There's nothing wrong with being skeptical about the resurrection. What's wrong is when we're skeptical and we don't ask questions and think. So here, just get all the pastel away for just a second and let's ask some honest questions. I'm going to be a little bit more teachy and intellectual for about 5 or 6 minutes. Is that all right? Turn your neighbor and say, turn your frontal lobe on. Turn the other neighbor and say, ham later, thinking now. 3 questions about the most outrageous claim ever made. 3 questions we have to ask. If you're a Christian, I want you, even if you already believe this stuff, I want you to ask it and make a commitment to learn it this year more than any other year. If you have not made a decision to follow Christ, I want to ask you to become intellectually curious. Because here's the thing. The first question is very simple. Did it happen? Are we just celebrating a myth? Was this the imagination of some well-meaning people? There's one great scholar out there. He's probably the most famous New Testament scholar. And what he believes is that Peter, in the shame of denying Christ, went back up to Galilee and he had so much shame. He had a crisis. And in his crisis, he had a delusion. And in the delusion, he imagined Jesus raised from the grave. And then he went around and told everyone. And then that kind of got caught on. The problem with this is you're saying, I'm going to believe one part of the story, but not the other part of the story, just because I don't believe in resurrections. And the also problem with this is you have to believe then that Peter was a very convincing mentally ill person. That he was mentally ill, but convinced everyone he wasn't. And that they should all believe what Peter said. See, I believe the evidence says something way different if we are honest about the evidence. Consider the eyewitnesses. Now, the eyewitnesses is one sliver of all the defense we can make about the resurrection. We don't have time to go over the guards' testimony and what it meant that the Roman guards were not there. We don't have time to go over what Josephus says about this or Tychius says about this, which are the extra biblical accounts that all agree with the Bible. We're just going to look at the eyewitnesses, and there's 3 things we have to look at. First is the female eyewitnesses. The Bible records in each one of the Gospels that the first people that the angel entrusted the message of the gospel to, that Jesus had risen, were females. Now, why is this so important? Well, females were regarded, especially by the Greeks and Romans, but by everyone, because they were deeply, deeply, deeply sexist culture. Females were property to be purchased. You would not, if you were going to make up a story, either whether you're doing it out of your own delusion and imagination or you're being deliberately deceptive, no one would think of a story where we said, hey, I know how to get a big movement to change the whole world. Let's start with female witnesses. You wouldn't do that. Why? Literally, what they believed in the first century is that females did not have the ability to be rational. They were hysterical. Okay? Everyone here, anyone know what a hysterectomy is? You know what a hysterectomy is? It's the same base Greek word as hysterical. A hysterectomy is a female surgery. That is an ancient tie back into what they called females, hysterical. So if a female said, I saw it, all the men would say, go cook. So why then did God have 3 females see Jesus? I'll tell you why. That's what happened. There's a thing that experts call the criterion of embarrassment. And what it means is the more embarrassing facts end up in a story, historically, the more likely that story is true. When things get into the story that you wouldn't want there, then that is an indication that that story is historically true. So if I'm making this story up, I do not start with 3 Jewish females. I don't start with any females. I start with some burly Roman, or I start with some courageous Peter. I don't talk about Peter's denying Christ. I make everyone look heroic and perfect in that fable of a story. The fact that the women are here, and there's so many other criterion of embarrassment in this story, is strong evidence that it really did happen. Then there's multiple eyewitnesses. The Apostle Paul says over 500 people witnessed in person the resurrected Jesus. Now, what you have to understand about the Apostle Paul saying this in 1 Corinthians is that Paul wrote very early on in the life of Christianity. So sometimes scholars will argue, I think the Gospel of John was written 100 years after Jesus. They're wrong. It's an earlier date than that. But none of the actual experts, either skeptics or those that believe, will argue that the Apostle Paul wrote long after the death and resurrection of Jesus. They all agree. Those that don't like Paul and those that do like Paul, like me, we all agree. The evidence is very strong. Paul wrote his letters to the Ephesians and the Corinthians and all of those folks very early. Within 2 decades of Christ living and dying, Paul was out there writing these letters. Why is that important? Every husband in the room, raise your hand. You're a husband, raise your hand. Okay, I got a question for you. You have 2 choices. I want you to say it out loud. Choice number 1 is no. Choice number 2 is yes. Every husband answer. Here's the question. Do you, husband, remember your wedding day? Yes. That was a test, and you all passed. You should have seen some of those losers at the 6 p.m. service yesterday, man. They went home and had an argument for Easter. I got married 38 years ago. Listen, my wife and I had a fight. It wasn't really a fight. It was a disagreement, a fun disagreement, actually, about 3 months ago, because I kept saying it's our 37th anniversary this summer, and she said it's our 38th, and neither of us knew which one was right. We had to go back and calculate from the kids' birthdays. That's how old I am. I can't remember which year it is, but I guarantee you I remember everything about that wedding day. I remember when she came around the corner. I remember how beautiful she looked. And I remember how skinny I used to be. I used to be so much more attractive, and my clothes fit good. I could wear light colors back then. This is as light of a shirt as I'll ever own. Third one, detailed eyewitnesses. Simply put, the gospel stories do not read like fables. C.S. Lewis, the great literary mind, great theological mind, he was an expert in fable and myth, or cultural stories that get passed down, and they're usually like parables that they teach us a lesson. And so that's why these stories survive. They teach powerful cultural lessons. But what he would say often is, if you call the Gospels fable, that means you've never studied or read fables, because these do not read like fables. And the main reason he says that is because fables do not contain details. They're not detailed stories. What is the address of Hansel and Gretel? We don't know. Was Hansel wearing lederhosen, or did he have some nice Levi's on? We don't know. It doesn't tell us. The only thing the detail we get in Hansel and Gretel is don't get lost, because you'll be eaten by cannibalistic witches. That's what we get, right? But you look at these gospel accounts, the details of the story are amazing. It tells us the time narrative, the location narrative, geographically where we're at, who has what title, who has what authority. It talks to us about the food items. They gave Jesus some food, and it says it was broiled fish. Not sushi, not poached, broiled fish. These details are strong indication that the story is historical. So some people look at this historical witnesses and say, yeah, that's powerful evidence. But I'm just going to discount all that by just simply saying this. It's impossible. The second your brain stops working and your heart stops pumping, your cells begin to deteriorate. Neurons in the brain, they deteriorate very fast, and it's impossible to turn them back around. That's why you can have people, even their lungs and heart are still working and they're dead, because the brain is dead. And so they just say, okay, you bring up all the witnesses you want. They got to be wrong, because dead people don't come back to life. It's physically impossible. Is it, though? I think when we say that, we're saying it from our point of view, our narrow little point of view. We're saying it would be impossible for our technology, our ability to bring someone back to the dead. And we're very right about that. But I want you to think about it from a creator's point of view. So we have the ability now with these telescopes that are flying out in our outer space to see things and measure things. See, we can even tell what gases are coming from some galaxies and some planets and individual stars. We can see from the background radiation where things are moving and how old they are. For instance, we can see pulsars now. We can actually look at pulsars now. We can see nebulas now. We can actually understand what the Oort cloud does. You know what the Oort cloud is? It's a giant icy sphere that covers our whole entire solar system. And it's very, 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 very far away, like 1.5 to 3.5 light years away from where we are right now. It's so far away. We can't see it, but we can measure the influence of the Oort cloud, and especially what they call long-traveling comets that come out of the Oort cloud. We know all that. This is undisputed. No one's fighting about this. And of course, everyone's favorite, we can see and measure and see what's happening with black holes. Thank God for black holes. I'm a science fiction fan. If there's no such thing as black holes, we would not have very much science fiction movies. They're in every movie. And I could go on and on and on. I could talk about gravity. I could talk about supernovas. I could talk about dark matter. Let me ask this question. Do you think we can't raise people from the dead, but do you think the guy who invented gravity might be able to? Listen, all the astronomers tell us that there was a dense piece of matter that appeared from nothing, and then in a moment, almost like someone said, let there be light. And the whole universe expanded, and it's still expanding to this day. Expanding into what? Don't ask scientists that. You're going to get a very confusing answer. But it's expanding, meaning there's something other than this universe. And you have kind of two choices in that. You can choose that came from nothing, or you could choose what every one of us knows intuitively. Nothing comes from nothing. You can choose that if it didn't come from nothing, there is something that's before, as odd as that sounds, time, space, and matter. Something more powerful than time, more powerful than space, and more powerful than matter. If you're more powerful than matter, do you think you might be more powerful than death? My friend, it is not illogical or irrational to think that there is a creator that has power over death, because he created dark matter, galaxies by the billions. The space of our universe, the Bible says the space of our universe fits between the thumb and pinky, the span of God's hand. For us, yes, impossible. For him, maybe not. Here's the point. This is what I want you to think all year till next Easter. What if death has died? What if he didn't come from nothing? What if God really exists? What if he is more powerful than time, space, and matter? And what if death has died? So then the next question is very simple. Why did it happen? Why did it happen? And I'll tell you, the simplest way to put this is God came to earth and died for us, died in our place, because God is both perfectly loving and perfectly just. God is not, he doesn't have the characteristics of love. He is love. Everything he does is love. He has no thing that he ever says or does that isn't love. He is love. He cannot be anything but love. But he's also perfectly just. I was telling the kids in Mexico, I said, you want to start to begin to maybe understand how loving God is? Just look at what Jesus did with his hands. He placed his hands on a leper's skin. He gave the greatest speech ever, the Sermon on the Mount. And when he came down from the mount, this leper comes right at him, falls at his feet, And he says, Jesus, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now, leprosy is a disease of the damage of the nerve endings in our body. And the first parts of your body that begin to show leprosy are the extremities, your nose, your cheeks, your foreheads. Every place where you see if a person gets frostbitten, that's kind of where leprosy shows up. So this man falls at Jesus' feet, his hands, his nose, his cheeks, it's ulcerated skin. And Jesus doesn't say a word to him. Instead, he reaches his hand out. Every religious person who saw this gasped. And he puts his hand on the head of this man's ulcerated skin. He touches the leper. And then he speaks. This is what God says to us in our leprosy. I am willing. Be clean. Same thing with the blind man. He touched his dysfunctional eyes. Same thing with the deceased 12-year-old girl, Jairus' daughter. He went into her house. She's laying there. Parents are there. Think about this. 12 years old. She's not breathing. And he takes her by the hand and he says, little girl, I command you, wake up. And she does this. Jesus grabbed Peter's hand when he was falling down because of the waves. He got afraid. He grabbed his hand. And then what Jesus did with his hands the week before he got crucified, they're even more amazing. At the dinner table, he took the bread with his hands and he broke it and said, this is my body. And he lifted the cup and he said, this is my blood shed for you. And then after the meal, he made the disciples all sit down, all of them, and God himself come to earth, wash their dirty feet. He used his hands to wash our feet. Then they tortured him. They beat him. They scourged his back. They opened up all the skin on his back, and they gave him a crossbar, and his hands held that crossbar to his bloody back as he walked to the place of the skull. And when he got there, they restrained his hands, and they put a spike in the middle of each hand. And they hung him on that cross. The thing about crucifixion that makes it so amazing and horrible and brilliant is that you don't die from the spikes in your hands and feet. You die from suffocation. This is why they broke the legs of the criminals on either side of him. What crucifixion does is it forces you to hang in such a way that your diaphragm gets fatigued very fast and you cannot breathe. Your body's natural response to extreme torture and pain is to faint, but you can't even faint in crucifixion. It's brilliant because if you faint, you won't breathe. So your body keeps itself awake just so you can breathe. And then you have to breathe deliberately, which means you have to pull on those nails in your hand and push on the nails in your feet to fill your lungs, which makes it even more amazing. The second you realize that Jesus spoke 7 times from the cross. 7 times he pushed on those nails. 7 times he pulled on those nails. And one of those times he said this, he said, forgive them. He endured incredible pain so he could say this, forgive them. God is perfectly loving, absolutely loving. But he's also absolutely just. Now, we love justice when it's pointed at the other guy. When someone cuts us off in traffic, or someone endangers our child, or when a teacher disappoints us, or a coach, or an authority figure, a boss, a coworker stabs us in the back, someone rips us off, steals something from us, violates us, takes our car. When those things happen, we're like, God, where's your justice, God? But when it's us, when we dishonor our parents, or we lie about something to make ourselves look better, we cheat on our taxes, or we covet something else has, we're jealous, we gossip about people, we tell bad things about them, even things that are not true, we worship things that don't deserve our devotion. When we do those things, we say cruel things, we gossip, we let our insecurity drive us to saying things that are damaging about another person we'd never once said about us. When those things happen, we're like, God, can you just not be so just? See, God can't. He knows every one of my sins. So what do? If you're perfectly loving to the point where you'll come and you'll touch lepers and you'll wash the feet of your creation, but you're perfectly just and you cannot let even one injustice happen, because then you would no longer be just. What do you do if you love like no one can imagine, but you also must have every injustice answered? You can't let one go. What do? If you're perfectly loving and you're perfectly just? What you do is you leave heaven, you come to earth as one of us, and you walk among us for 33 years, teaching us, healing us, washing our feet. Then you let yourself be falsely accused. At the trial, you say nothing. You say nothing. You don't defend yourself. And then they torture you, they beat you. They put a crown of thorns on your head, they pluck your beard out, they put a sack over your head so you can't even flinch when they hit your face. You carry your own cross to the place of the skull. They put a pole in about a 2-foot hole. We always imagine that it's all the way up on a hill and the pole and the cross is very tall. That's not the way it happened at all. He was 6 inches from the ground, completely naked. His mother was right there. Why? Because he's perfectly loving and he's perfectly just. So he took the sin that was ours. Why did it happen? The simplest answer is this: because Kurt Harlow is a sinner and he cannot have a relationship with God unless his sin is paid for. And God loves Kurt Harlow. Number 3, I'm going to skip the key there and just go right to number 3. How should you respond? How should you and I respond? Well, I recommend that you take a cue from the Jewish boys who followed Jesus for those 3.5 years. You see, what happens is right at the end, right before Jesus goes back to heaven, the Bible records that they did something very interesting. And with our Gentile ears, we don't see how shocking this is. It says that right at the end, they worshiped him. They worshiped him. Now, to Jewish ears, this is shocking. And the reason is because Jewish people are monotheistic. Most of human history, everyone was polytheistic. Multiple gods. We worship all these gods. We're going to add gods. We're taking gods away. Only Israel stood up for monotheism. In our world today, monotheism is very popular in 3 major religions: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. But back then, monotheism was a very, very minority. And because it was such a minority, it was emphasized in Judaism like no other truth. Each devout Jewish male started their day by standing out in front of their house, and they would say these words every single day. "Hear, O Israel," they'd say it out loud. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one God." What are these Jewish boys who've been taught from the beginning of their life that you don't worship anything but God? Only God is worshiped. What are they doing worshiping this carpenter's son? Well, finally, at the end, they figured it out. They remembered all of it. They remembered the moment Jesus said to a man, "You are forgiven." And they thought, only God can forgive sin. And they remember the moment that he said to the wind and the waves, "Shut up." Only God commands creation. And they remembered the moment he told the little girl, "You're no longer dead, wake up." And he told the brother of the widow in the city of Nain, "I give you back to your mother, wake up." And he told Lazarus, "I know you're wrapped in those grave clothes, but come on out, you're alive again after 4 days of being dead." And they thought only God has power over life and death. And they figured it out. They figured out what Isaiah meant when he called the Messiah this: Emmanuel, God with us. They said it's not just a nice little title. He's God and he's with us. Here's my prayer for you: that you would figure it out. That this would be the year you realize it's not about a church, a denomination, a little room, a small group, whether you tithe or serve or give. I hope you do all those things. But none of those things happen in the right way until you figure this out. It's about God come to earth. And you worship him. Say, "Kurt, I don't like singing. I'm not a good singer. Listen, I'm not talking about singing. Worship is so much more than that. Worship, someone said to me, Kurt, your God's a very insecure God because he requires all this worship. I said, you get it wrong. God doesn't need the worship. I need to worship. God went for eons without anyone worshiping him. God doesn't need any of our songs, our devotion. He doesn't need us to submit ourselves to him. God needs us to do it because it's good for us. When I put my place as the creation, not the creator, my life gets whole and better again. You are to worship God. That means come back to church. That means walk each and every day under the weight of the knowledge that God really does love you so much that he came to earth and died for you. You know why most people reject Christianity? It's not because of lack of evidence. It's because they have a hard time believing God really loves them that much. But it's true, my friend. God loves you that much. He really does. And Easter is the proof. You know, going out of Mexico every year is such a privilege for me because I get to see the fact that God is alive and well and loving people to this day. It's not a 2,000 year ago thing. This last Monday night, I preached in Mexicali, Mexico, and I asked the students, I said, would you consecrate yourself, it says in Joshua 3, which just simply means you put stuff down that you're not going to take across the river. I said, if you've got something here you need to put down. And at first only one student stood up, then another, then another. And then I said, all right, all you students standing up, start praying for one another. We started at about 7 p.m. There was students praying at midnight. I couldn't stop them. It was the most beautiful, incredible thing. I think we got a few pictures of it here. That's the whole camp. That's them. I mean, I go out there at 11:30, and there's these 3 girls praying for each other, just crying. Right in the front, there was a dad and his son, and I asked Colton, I said, what's the deal with them? He said, well, the dad had to drag the son down here. The son didn't want to come at all, and when you said you had to drop something, the son said, I'm going to drop all my anger at my dad. I realize he loves me, and that's why I'm here. And they were just melted in each other's arms. My friend, God, you exist. You didn't come from nothing. Your life is powerful evidence that there is a God. But not only that, he was here. Historically, he walked among us, and there's powerful evidence in the eyewitnesses and more. But even more powerful than the fact that you exist and you didn't come from nothing, and he was here, is the fact that right now in Auburn, California, in a room that was meant to be office space, he still exists. We are here, he was here, he is here. And if you give your life, you surrender your life to him, he'll change you so much you'll start changing everyone around you. I stole my first Bible. That's how I got started on this. I think we got a picture of it. This is the actual Bible I stole. I went in my sister's room. She said, don't go down there, the little brother, so I went down there. She's gone. I parted the beads, walked right in. If you laughed at that, you just aged yourself. You got it too. Yeah, we used to take the doors down and hang beads. I don't know why. And I was going to steal the double album, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John. And I did. Stole that album. And then right next to it was that Bible I just showed you right there. And I stole that. And I went upstairs and I got my bed and I put the covers over my bed and I got a flashlight because I didn't want it was a bunk bed. I didn't want my brother Chris to see I was reading the Bible because I was embarrassed. And I began to read these stories and the Gospels. The Bible fell open just to the Gospels. I didn't know what the Gospels were. I didn't know the difference between New and Old Testament. I started reading the words of Jesus' life. And when it got down to the crucifixion, I thought, this is a wonderful story, but it's just a story. And I don't know how that got in my head. I had somehow learned, I never studied this or asked any questions, but somehow I'd already learned at that early age that the Bible had been copied over and over again and been changed over and over again. And that's a stupid lie, by the way. There's no evidence for that. We have many manuscripts. But I had believed this, that this is just a fable, and this isn't the Bible they had, and this really didn't happen. There probably wasn't even a guy named Jesus. It's probably some amalgamation of several people from all those years ago. But I kept reading. I kept reading every night. And one night I got to this claim by Jesus. Ask and you'll be answered. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be open. And a little mustard seed of faith appeared in my life. And I thought, what if it's true? What if he does love me? And so I thought of the two hardest questions I could think of. I said, God, I'm going to ask you these two hard questions, and if you answer them, I might start to maybe give my life to you. The first question was this: God, why won't Debbie Wildermuth go out with me? Well, you laugh. To a 16-year-old boy, that's a deep theological question. My second question is, God, why do I fight with my mother so much? Just fight every day. Went to sleep, got up, forgot I had that Bible moment and prayer moment, went off to school, walking down the school hallway. I'm going right past Russ Brantner's math room. I'm just walking right past it in the middle of my school day, and all of a sudden, God speaks to me. You say, Kurt, was it audible? No, it was louder than that. Was it words, Kurt? No, he didn't speak words to me. It was a knowing. I understood. I had an epiphany in a minute. But it's easy to put it into words. To this day, I can tell you exactly what he put in me. He said, Kurt, I'm going to answer both your prayers in one answer because the same answer is for both of the prayers. He said, the reason that girl won't go out with you and the reason that you fight with your mother so much is because, Kurt, you are a deeply, deeply selfish person. All you think about is you. And now when I say it out loud, it sounds like very cruel, but when I heard it from God, it wasn't that way at all. It was like God was saying, Kurt, I know all your sins. I know all your faults. I know all your fears. I know all your insecurities. And Kurt, I also know your name. And Kurt, I also love you. And Kurt, I've been waiting for you to ask me to speak to you. I've been waiting for you to ask. I've been waiting to answer. I've been waiting for you to seek because I want to be found by you. I've been waiting for you to knock so I could open the door. Kurt, I love you. And that's why a know-nothing, invisible, acne on his acne, ADD kid can become a pastor. Because God really does know my name. And he knows what I was knit in my mother's womb to do. I'm going to ask you to bow your head. I got to hurry. Everyone backstage's mad at me. I don't care. You guys made all the effort to get here. We're not going to shut this down, not one bit. But listen to me. Everyone bow your head. I'm going to ask you to have a moment right now, just you and God. If you're a Christian, I'm going to ask you to think about whether this year is the year you go after knowing that Jesus really did come. You go after knowing that he died in your place. And if you're not following Christ, you've gotten distracted and you're not following him, or you've never given your life to him in the first place, I'm going to give you an opportunity to enter into relationship with Jesus right now by simply praying a prayer. Right where you're sitting, I'll pray out loud. You pray in your heart. The words aren't the important part. It's the trust. It's the surrender of the prayer that makes it work. Right where you're sitting, say this directly to God in your heart. God, I give you my life. This life you have given me, I freely and completely hand it back to you. You be in charge of me. God, the gift of forgiveness you offer through Jesus Christ, I receive it. Let your forgiveness cover every part of my life. And God, I want to know why you put me on this earth. I want to know what I was knit in my mother's womb for. So God, as I follow you now, show me what you made me to be, what you made me to do. Show me who I am like no other can. In short, God, make me a follower. Give me the courage and the grace to follow you every day and in every way. If that was you and You just prayed that prayer with me. I want to do one more thing, one more simple thing. It'll only take a second. I want to pray over you. I want to pray a blessing over you. So, here's what we're going to do. Keep your head bowed. Keep your eye closed. I don't want anyone else to see this except for you and God. But if you just prayed that prayer with me, I want you to do me one favor. Would you just lift your hand and say, yeah, pray for me, Pastor Kurt. Just put it up in the air so I can see it.